Hi everyone, welcome to the recap of the Swoop Great Debate on the topic of is it possible to control or manage internal communications in this omni-channel hybrid working world? So we were joined yesterday by about, I think there was probably around 60 participants throughout, around that sort of 50 to 60 mark that joined us for the session. And we had people joining us from South Africa to Peru, from Geneva, from London, from New York, all over. So it was a really fantastic turnout for obviously a discussion that sort of touched a lot of people and got them excited. With that number of people on the call, we took a slightly different approach. Rather than just having an open floor and letting it bubble, we thought, well, with this many people, we'll try something slightly different. And we actually used some kind of contextual polling, I guess you would call it, to surface some of the challenges and spark some of the conversation. So probably the easiest thing in terms of giving a recap is if I pull up the poll results and then we can speak to those. Hey, Luke?
Sounds good. Yeah, I think the polling really, brought a new element to this. When we launched the first debate, we had a smaller group. Obviously, this has gone viral since then. It's everyone's getting very excited about it. Audience is growing. You'll see us. We'll have a podcast next, Pete. But I think that the polling sort of allowed much broader participation. We got some really good results from the number of people that were there. Everyone was, getting in on it. But for the people who are a bit camera shy, or they don't want to unmute, or they just sort of, scoping things out, I think the polling really allowed good participation. So I think it's we're on a winning formula here. So I'm looking forward to keeping it going. So the first question was: Is hybrid working the future of your organization? This is where we netted out. Looks like 40 of our respondents came back to us. I'm not surprised that there was a no's. I am not surprised that not everyone is sort of saying yes for all of our organization. And I think by the very nature, a lot of the folks who are there, particularly Swoop customers, like depending on their business model, some of them simply cannot have people who are working from home. Some of them have frontline workers. They've got people who are working in their storefronts or maybe out on the road, technicians, that sort of thing. So I'm not surprised to see this one felt pretty right, about right to me.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, it's easy if you look at sort of the business media and research and news articles around over the last couple of years. You would happily believe that every single business around the world has gone completely hybrid, and it's all set in stone. So it's interesting to see 13% of responses were maybe. People are still very uncertain. This is 2 years into this kind of pandemic era, I guess. And I think that it's just telling that yes, for some areas of our organization, I'd be surprised if this, on a global scale, these percentages weren't pretty fair across the world, because there's just a whole lot of massive organizations that it's not a remote possibility for them to all have that flexibility, I guess, and to leverage the hybrid working model. That concept of hybrid is not necessarily impacting everybody in the same way. It makes sense, right? But good to see it kind of in black and white, or blue and grey in the case of these results.
I remember we had somebody chimed up and sort of joined in with this during this question, sort of highlighted the difference between sort of your knowledge workers, where it's obviously logically makes sense, like the hybrid thing's very easy, and then your front line is different. So I think that really just resonated with me as a key takeaway.
Yeah. Then we moved on to talking more specifically about communication and collaboration. And over the last 2 years, how much has the way that people communicate and collaborate changed? So I was pleasantly surprised by this to see that 18%, I think that's a high number of respondents, were saying it's completely transformed. So we talk with a lot of people a lot of the time who are saying we're in this sort of messy middle phase still. So it's cool to know that there's a decent chunk of people out there that are feeling like, you know what, things have really massively transformed, and maybe we're coming into this new era where we've got the channel landscape and the transformation is well underway, if not complete. I guess there's no such thing as a complete transformation. But did anything really jump out at you in the conversation that stemmed from this question, Luke?
You know, somebody was talking about sort of how in the last 2 years, one of the things they've found really difficult to sort of get a control on is what they called shadow technology. It was sort of like, I never really heard anyone talk about it like that, but it's like, you know, organizations where they've got these tools, but it's kind of hard to get them working on your mobile phone, and you're sort of like in ways that work for you. So teams go ahead and set up a WhatsApp group, or they, you know, they've got like whole like departments on their floor, frontline staff who are communicating using WhatsApp, and how, you know, that creates a lot of problems for technology teams. You know, it's not cloud based, not secure, it's not governed. You can't like control access. Someone was talking about how they had somebody who had left the organization and gone to work for a competitor, but was still a member of the WhatsApp group for the like, you know, these incredibly complex things that have emerged in this world where the need to communicate is really been amplified, I think. Yeah. And I did love there's a bit of commentary around sort of how some of the core sort of technology pieces are playing catch up there. So I think that's really promising, and I just remember that outtake.
Yeah, and there was some interesting conversation on this point around how different areas of the business or different areas of organizations have been impacted to differing levels, and for some organizations, they just haven't needed to change in response. So obviously, like, you look at that 3% of people who have not changed at all, that's not necessarily a negative. They may have been real front runners who are fully remote, and there's actually been no change for them. Or it may be that they're very sort of traditional or even non-digital communication and collaboration environments, but they haven't had a need to change that. So it's just worth reminding, it's interesting context, not to get carried away by a lot of the talk out there around hybridification and digitization, that there's still this human element of, you know, people doing their day-to-day job, and sometimes that's changed massively, sometimes it hasn't, and it's just worth having that context in mind when you're thinking about this sort of proposition of it's impossible to manage internal comms in the hybrid working world. Just rein that in a little bit with, not everybody has gone to hybrid working in an extreme way. And so I just found that an interesting thing that kind of was a thread throughout the discussion, I felt.
I wondered if that % was actually Team Swoop, because I was answering the poll as we were going through. I'm like, well, nothing changed here. We are not your atypical organization, though. Like, we sort of, you know, we do communicate in those collaborative ways, and nothing really did change very much in the last 2 years. But I did wonder, like, you know, I was definitely among that %. But
yeah. So, and has the amount of change to how people communicate and collaborate been right for your organization? So this is about getting the context of the amount of change. And to be honest, it didn't surprise me to see 35% saying they wanted more change. Obviously, the collective in the session is a collective of kind of pioneering type people who want to be at the cutting edge and want to be doing the latest, greatest thing. So it's not surprising that of the people that were in the debate session, there was a good chunk of people that were feeling like we want more change. But to me, the biggest thing on this front came out around that whole change management piece that you've mentioned. How do you make time and space for people to learn how to change? And particularly in these organizations where you've got a heavy operational focus, you've got businesses under a lot of stress and strain right now, obviously, in the economic environment globally, and people are just trying to get their job done. And how, in amongst doing their day job, are they meant to find time to do that training course on how to use Microsoft Teams, to understand the sort of nuances of using Yammer as a community connection and communication tool? There was that particular case study someone mentioned from the care sector, she raised the challenge there around, we've rolled out these digital tools, but we've got such a diverse range of worker type or demographic, I guess, from an 18-year-old up to a 80-year-old working in that environment. So you've got this multi-generation workforce, and they're doing everything they can to deliver on their core purpose of being a care worker, let's say. And in amongst that, how do they then get layered on top the time and the space to learn how to adapt in this new world that's kind of being rolled out to them, but perhaps they're not being able to adapt to it?
I almost felt a sense of relief with this question, because I thought, almost half the people are saying, the change that's happening is about right for us at the moment. And, you hear a lot in the media about fatigue and hybrid work, Zoom call fatigue, all this sort of stuff. So I did feel a sense of relief. I wondered, though, if we had polled the end user, would it be different, right? We did have internal comms, digital workplace, HR, the people who are driving the change. I wonder if if the response would be the same if we were surveying, the people at the end who were receiving the change. That's a question for me. But
good call out.
It's good that people aren't totally overwhelmed, or they think there could be more.
Yeah, for sure. This next one was a fun one. So we asked people to just write down which communication or collaboration tools people in their organization use. And this was, we were actively saying official or unofficial, because so many people raise this thing of, like you said, shadow IT, shadow comms. What do people in your organization use? And obviously on this word map, word cloud, the size of the word is sort of showing how many times it was mentioned, and it was really interesting to see Yammer, Teams, email, but then WhatsApp.
I was baffled by that. I was really surprised to see WhatsApp there so big. That really surprised me. I actually afterwards went started looking, does WhatsApp have sort of a business or enterprise? They kind of do, but I think for small businesses, and definitely not for sort of the kind of companies that we have on the call. Anyway, I thought that was amazing. I did love the response just below Teams there. It says, you name it, we have it. And I think there was an overarching theme, from a couple of the folks who were on the call who spoke at different times, sort of saying that there is truly, a bit of confusion amongst the ranks. There's that people are sort of thinking, that they're confused. They're not sure about which tool when. I wrote a note here. Employees are confused by number of channels. That was at one of the guys who was sharing a story from inside their organization. And look, you can see it here. There's a lot going on across the board.
Yeah. So, and a couple of points that really resonated with me on that front were, in this world of kind of hyper choice, there was one attendee who made some really good points, I thought, around rather than trying to narrow down people's choice and say you must only use these tools, flip that a bit and just think we need to make our official tools so appealing that people choose to use them, right? And I loved that sort of perspective of saying, stop trying to control this sprawl, but just make sure that the channels that you do control have such awesome content and you're doing such engaging things in there that people want to be a part of it. So you need to get them to the point where, if Luke isn't using Yammer, he's missing out, and he's feeling that he's missing out. So creating content that's so engaging that people want to opt into that channel, because they can't have the experience unless they're part of that channel. So I thought that was a really nice point that was made. And I'm sure that a lot of people kind of nodded along when that point was being made.
Absolutely.
And then we got to the final sort of piece, which is the sort of premise of the whole debate, which is, do you actually think it's possible to control internal comms in this omni-channel hybrid working world? And this here, again, pleasantly surprising to me that we had 57% people saying, yes, definitely possible, absolutely sure that it is possible to control internal comms in this world. And then just before I hand over to you, Luke, because it was referencing, it was the same person who was talking about creating amazing content that made the point of saying that they'd selected, no, it's time to give up trying to control things because of that concept, their fundamental philosophy around it being create amazing content, give people amazing experiences that they opt in. So someone saying, no, it's time to give up trying to control things isn't actually a negative. It's very much intended in a positive manner in that instance. So, but yeah, for you, what resonated with you in the discussion on this one?
I think the thing that this says to me is like that the role of internal comms has evolved. Internal comms, I just think back to my days in sort of big corporations, and internal comms is always very much like a top-down function. Like we're publishing things on behalf of the leadership, and they would sort of have these ghost accounts to reply. But what I think in the last 2 years is internal comms has become sort of an enabler for the communication of the organization, and I think the mix of answers here like just is very telling, because I think it is definitely possible to control it, right? Like I think there has to be some sense of control, like directing it into the right channels. But by the same token, you've also got to allow freedom, right? You've also got to allow sort of, water finds a way, I always like to say. And people will show up in the place that makes sense to them, in the context of their day, in the context of their work. And I think that this answer, like, there's a lot of hidden meaning in here when it comes to sort of the role of internal communications now and in the future. I'm excited to see it keep evolving.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's the overarching thing was it was positive vibes, wasn't it? And great just again to get people together in this sort of community, I guess, that we're really building on a global level to share their war stories and debate some of the sort of elements that make up this weird and wild and crazy world of digital workplace, internal communications, and basically like how do organizations adapt at speed to particularly the technological impetuses that are coming through. But I think the key thing that comes through in all the discussions and all the points that people are making is, yes, technology is driving a lot of the change, but it's the people that actually make the change worthwhile. And that's definitely something that came through loud and clear, I felt, from this conversation, was people are the core of focus. That's where you should be focusing, is on the people. And there's some I guess now that a lot of organizations have really sort of leveled up their platform position and they're leveraging the actual sort of tools, or the tools are in place.
Yep.
Now I think the next wave of challenge is how to really get people to optimize and to use those tools in the right way and behave and develop modern working habits that really sort of get the best from that toolkit. So yeah, some juicy stuff. I could talk all day, but I think I'll just stop now and leave it there. From my perspective, is there anything you want to say before we wrap this up?
It's a wrap. Thanks everyone who joined and who listened to this recap, who came along to the debate yesterday. We're going to keep this format going and keep it evolving. So we'll be back with another debate in March. Topic TBC. If you've got something that you feel passionate about, let us know. We'd love to hear.
Awesome.
Thanks, Pete.
Cheers, Luke. See ya.